Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike, and tonight I am joined by a guest host. I'll let you introduce yourself. I know him as Scooby. I don't know how you want to be known. That's how I know you on Twitter. So I don't know how you want to be
Seth.
known on this podcast. Seth. All
You
right.
can call me Seth. Yep. But
We will
Scooby
refer to you as Seth.
227. Yep.
Yes, but he is Scooby227 on Twitter, so give him a follow. So our good friend John, unfortunately, is under the weather this week. So we wish him the best. Hope he feels better soon. But Seth was nice enough to step in, and so he will be co-hosting the podcast with me this week until John. John will be back in the next podcast. Don't worry about that.
Don't worry, you only have to deal with me for 1 week. So
yeah, it'll be 1 week, and we'll see how it goes. It should be a good time. I'm excited about it.
Oh yes, it's fun.
So how are you doing tonight, Seth?
So. Doing good. It's cold. Fall finally came, so
fall is here. I think I see the weather is changing. We might get the leaves might start changing now too. I'm looking forward to it because I was sick of my summer. Mostly for going to games. I was sick of having summer weather for going to games. I'm ready for a nice fall day when I can wear a hoodie and really relax into it. You know what I mean? And you get that crisp fall air. And also your drinks stay cold longer
the whole
in the fall.
time. The whole
yes,
time.
Which I appreciate.
Yes. Yep. I appreciate those nice colder games. Not like freezing cold where you have to put on several different layers.
That's a different thing.
Just like a sweatshirt, you know?
Yeah.
Sweatshirt, even sweatpants or just jeans, you know.
Something in the 40s or 50s.
Yeah.
Or maybe or low 60s.
Yeah.
You know, where you can really get comfy, but it's not that cold.
Yeah, because I was at the Purdue game. So I have season tickets for those who don't know.
So yes, we have Seth is a Wisconsin Badger fan, so this might shock you to see that on this Gopher-led podcast we have a Wisconsin Badger coming in to co-host. But that is the way the world works, and we are friends with all people.
Absolutely. So yeah, I was at the Purdue Wisconsin game, and kickoff was at 11 a.m. and it was 80 degrees. So I'm just like, yeah. I'm okay, ready for,
It might as well be August. Might as well be August.
Yep. It kind of felt like first game of the season type feel, and I was just like, yeah, I'm ready for that. So
absolutely awesome. Well, should we get into reviewing these games?
Absolutely. Let's get it.
Awesome. So week 7 was a crazy week in the Big Ten. We had a ton of exciting games this week, including 2 overtime games and 2 other games that came down to the final snap.
Yes.
That is an exciting weekend of football.
Not only that, but the Big Ten West offenses. What on earth? Illinois, Purdue, Wisconsin, Iowa. I'm sorry, Minnesota. You left out of that scoring.
We didn't score a ton of points, but we won, and that's the main thing.
And that is the main thing.
The Big Ten West did win a lot of games this weekend. There's no question about it. And they kind of flexed a little bit, as we always said they would when they get into conference play. So this idea that it's funny you say that, because I saw that longtime antagonist of the podcast, Bud Elliott, openly admitted that he needed to apologize to the Big Ten West. Only he said it's because they leveled up their game. And I think that's horse manure. I think what we're seeing now is the Big Ten West is playing normal Big Ten schedules. And guess what? The Big Ten West is still winning football games.
Yeah.
And you thought that wasn't going to happen. And turns out it's happening. So that's not because they leveled up any of these programs. It's because you're seeing these programs again and giving them respect like they should have had before.
Right. Exactly. And it goes to show you that, any team could have a bad week, could have a good week.
The Big Ten is so deep. The floor is so high.
The floor is so high and it's so deep.
Yep. Absolutely agree with you there. All right. Well, the first game we had was on Friday, October 11th. This was it was the Northwestern Wildcats 37, the Maryland Terrapins 10. So this was a dominant performance from Northwestern. They led 17-7 at the half, outscored Maryland 20-3 in the second half. I mean, I did not expect this kind of offensive and defensive explosion from Northwestern against what has been a competitive Maryland team. Jack Lausch had an effective performance. He was just 10 of 18, but averaged over 11 yards per attempt, threw for 203 yards when all was said and done. So Northwestern didn't throw a lot, but they were really dynamic when they did complete passes. The star was wide receiver Bryce Kurtz, who had 123 yards receiving on just 3 catches with a long of 55. It's kind of amazing he didn't score a receiving TD given how long his catches were. And wide receiver AJ Penning had 3 catches for 61, so that was a big deal as well. AJ Henning, excuse me. Northwestern had very little success running the ball, as lead back Cam Porter had just 23 yards on 9 carries. The rest of the Northwestern squad was shut down as well, as the Cats managed just 80 yards rushing on 2.4 yards per carry. So this win was all about a boomer bust passing game and fantastic defensive play. And that defense, man, Northwestern forced 4 Maryland turnovers. Billy Edwards was responsible for 2 of them, as he threw a pick and also had a lost fumble. By contrast, Northwestern had 0 turnovers. That was a huge difference in this game. And Terps QB Billy Edwards was just 28 for 51. So 296 yards, but just 5.8 yards per attempt. So he had almost 300 yards passing, but it took him a lot of tries to get there. So it wasn't that efficient. And he finished with a QBR of just 34.1. So that wasn't, great. Yeah. Maryland running game was non-existent, as Roman Hemby had just 42 yards on 3 yards per carry, and Maryland only managed 59 yards rushing on the game for 1.8 yards per attempt. Caden Prather and Ty Felton led the way for Maryland, combining for 17 catches for 158 yards. Preston Howard and Octavian Smith also chipped in with 59 and 43 yards receiving, respectively. So I gotta give it up for the Northwestern D and linebacker Mac Uline, who had 13 total tackles, including 11 solo and a pass defended for the game. So that's really impressive. Also got to give it up for Cats DB Theron Johnson, who had 5 tackles, a tackle for loss, 3 passes defended. So a really nice day for him. So Seth, what'd you think about this game?
It was crazy amount of deep passes that Northwestern had, and then turnovers are the key for Maryland. I mean, 3 turnovers, one of them returned for a touchdown. That's you're not going to win very many games if you have a -3, in a turnover battle. So
no, you really aren't.
Yeah, especially with Northwestern. Badgers have had issues with Northwestern in the past.
Everyone's had issues with Northwestern at some point.
Everyone has had issues. They're a very difficult out, and it's like.
And it's funny because they always look less athletic than you, and you always think it's going to be easy.
Yep.
But it's never easy, and it's first Pat Fitzgerald and now David Braun seem to have the magic pixie dust.
Yes.
It just makes everything better. I remember reading an article once about, this was back in the Fitzgerald era, so I don't know if it would still apply, but how Northwestern's DBs would audible during the play.
Yeah.
Like they would change coverages during the play depending on the first 2 steps of the wide receivers. And I was like, that's crazy talk. But they would do stuff like that and just lock you down. You had no idea how it was happening.
Right.
But yeah, Northwestern is getting better under David Braun. After a really shaky start to the year, Northwestern is improving.
And I thought they would have kind of a step back this year because of what they lost at quarterback. It's kind of like that momentum factor. You lose your head coach before the season. Everybody's rallying around him now.
Right.
And I thought this year that they would kind of fall back a little bit. Well, it's Northwestern, so they somehow find that extra magic somewhere.
Yeah, they're going to be a tough out period.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And it was funny because 2 weeks ago when they were playing against Indiana, one of my friends was sitting sitting next to me before the Badger game, and they were just like, man, Northwestern looks like a high school football team against Indiana. I was just like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
But
don't
they
know how they
battled
do it.
back in that game. They
Yes,
battled
they
back in
did.
that game.
Yep, they battled back in that game. They made it pretty close. But it's just like, I don't know how they do it every single week.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. So I got to ask before we move on from this game, Seth, where are you at with Mike Locksley? Because it seems like Maryland is once again regressing as the season progresses, which has been their pattern just about every year, except for last year when they had a senior Leah Tagovailoa and a senior offensive line. The
Yeah.
DMV area has a lot of high school talent, and I
Yep.
think it's fair to be critical of Locksley for not putting together better teams, especially on the lines of scrimmage where
Yeah.
they're just consistently subpar.
Yeah. It comes down to winning. And it depends on what your fan base, agrees with you or doesn't agree with you. And at the end of the day, if you don't um get results, you're not going to be in the job forever. Um,
So how
as
close do you think
far,
Mike Locksley is to like a hot seat?
I think after this year, depending, if they don't even make a bowl game this year, he's definitely on the hot seat, at
Yeah.
least in my opinion. Um, it all depends on, what the fan base thinks of it. But if I was a Maryland fan, he's definitely on the hot seat because he's brought in players before. He's brought in some high level talented recruits.
I mean,
And
they
then,
always have talent. Maryland's always fast. They are
yeah,
always fast. They're
yep,
always athletic. They're always talented,
yeah.
but
But it's like,
they don't get better.
right,
It's like whatever they are in like
yep,
September, that's what they are for the whole year.
yes,
They don't improve. You don't see that arc like you do with other teams.
right. And you don't see them progressing through the season. You don't see like any of the new guys progressing either.
Yeah.
It's just it's a senior laden team as always that always underperforms and then they get stuck in the mud battling for a bowl game.
Yeah, and here they are. So they're 3-3 and
Mhm.
coming up they've got USC, then they have to go to Minnesota for Minnesota's homecoming. Then they've
Okay.
got a bye, but then they've got Oregon, then Rutgers, then Iowa, then at Penn State. So they got to go to
Mm.
Oregon. They got to go to Penn State. Those Iowa and Rutgers games and won't be picnics either. And SC and Minnesota. I mean, are they going to be favored in any of those games? I think they're going to be the underdog in all of those games.
They could for sure be an underdog in all those games.
So, I mean, Locksley, man, if he's going to get to 6-6, he really needed to be 4-2 right now.
Yes. Yep.
You know?
Yeah. Like if I'm going down that list right now, I'd say maybe Rutgers.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Yes.
Maybe.
Maybe Rutgers. That's a home game. Sure. Like
Yeah.
maybe I can talk you can talk
Maybe.
me into Billy Edwards lighting up Rutgers. Rutgers is looking that defense is looking vulnerable suddenly.
Yep.
I
It
mean,
is.
we'll talk
We'll get
about
to that
that
later.
later. Yeah, we'll get to that exactly. All
But
right. Yeah.
I 1-5, 2-4 maybe out of that stretch.
Yeah.
End of the year.
So if they finish 4-8, 5-7, then yeah, there have to be serious questions, I think, about the Mike Locksley regime. And like next year becomes a do or die season, I feel like.
Yeah, I feel that the same way. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. What do you have to sell the program to?
Yeah.
There's no kids that are upcoming that are high. Oh, hey, we got a flashy, big time 4-star kid coming in. You don't hear that from Maryland. So
Yeah, at a certain point, you're
you
either
gotta.
progressing or you're regressing for sure.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Let's move on to the Saturday games. I say let's start with the biggest game right off the bat. We had the number 3 Oregon Ducks 32.
Yep.
The number 2 Ohio State Buckeyes 31. Since Oregon and now, and this game was Back and forth all day and totally bonkers. Must watch television throughout. If you so much as blink during this game, you are missing a big play.
Yep.
Both teams dominated offensively in the first half before both defenses played a little better in the second half, at least in, at least on their halves of the field. The end was insane, and we got to talk about it first, I think.
Yes.
So Oregon QB Dylan Gabriel scored on a 27-yard keeper early in the fourth quarter to give Oregon a 29-28 lead. But Ohio State responded with a clock-chewing drive and a field goal to go up 31-29 with 6 minutes to go. A PI call got the Bucs to the Ohio State's 9, but Oregon settled for an Atticus Sappington 19-yard field goal with 1:47 left to take the lead 32-31. Ohio State QB Will Howard hit Emeka Egbuka for a 26-yard pass to put the Buckeyes in field goal range, but an offensive PI call on Frost Jeremiah Smith pushed Ohio State back. On 3rd and 20 from the Oregon 38 with just seconds remaining, Will Howard had the worst brain cramp of his entire life and inexplicably took off running with 4 seconds left and then slid after time expired. It was a brain cramp that ruined what was an otherwise impressive performance from Howard. So first of all, Seth, before we even talk about the game, do you think that should have been pass interference on Jeremiah Smith?
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Sell me on it.
So I'm a former high school official
Sure.
for the state of Wisconsin.
Right.
The keys of looking for pass interference or obvious pass interference is the extension. So if you look on the replay, his arms were fully extended on his break.
Okay.
That is 99.99% a pass interference. Unfortunately for the Ohio State Buckeyes fans there. Would it have made a world of difference? We don't know. It could have been a fumble to the very next play. Something like that.
We don't know what would have happened. I'll say for me, I hate that call. I hate it. I disagree with you, and here's why I hate it, because both guys are hand fighting. And it's funny. Right. I actually got to meet with some people from the Minnesota program earlier tonight, and I'm going to say somebody close to the program because I don't want to get anybody in trouble. He said straight up, absolutely, they would not call that. Personally, okay. They would not call that PI. But of course, you're an official, so I give you the weight that gives it. I just think with Jeremiah Smith, he has kind of the issue that like young LeBron James had, in that he's so much more of a physical specimen than everybody else that it's like him just doing normal stuff looks like he's committing penalties.
Right. Yeah.
So I do think there's some of that with him.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely part of that too, where, he's actually too physical and too overpowering, even for that defensive back who, has been in the program for years at Oregon. So, he's not a young kid where they're throwing out as a freshman or a true sophomore.
Right.
He's been in the program. So to see that physicality from Jeremiah Smith is just unreal.
Yeah, he's really impressive, even if that was a mistake.
Yeah.
Offensive PIs are almost always drive killers, and this was no exception. And it just I hate when games, I'm not saying it was decided on the penalty, but it made a big difference in the game.
Oh, it's always a big difference, especially if
that's 15 yards on offense, and then it's really tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough if you get an offensive PI. All right, let's start with the losing Buckeyes. Before that last play, Howard was fantastic, completing 80% of his passes, 28 for 35, 326 yards, 2 TDs, 0 picks, 9.3 yards per attempt, a QBR of 93.4. It's hard to play that much better than that. Travion Henderson had a weird day. He had a couple big runs, including an early 53-yard dash, but was largely shut down, and Quinshon Judkins was entirely shut down, and the two combined for just 110 yards on 21 attempts. Jeremiah Smith did Jeremiah Smith things with 9 grabs for 100 yards and a TD, and not to be outdone, Emeka Egbuka had 10 catches for 93 yards and a TD. The Buckeyes did lose a fumble, which was a costly error by Judkins, that gave Oregon a ton of momentum when they needed it. As great as Howard was, you could argue Gabriel was even better. He was 23 of 34, 341 yards on 10 yards per attempt, 2 TDs, 0 picks, a QBR of 95.9. That is scorching hot play from the QB position. Jordan James had a nice day running the ball with 115 hard-fought yards on 23 carries. But wide receivers Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson were the stars with 149 and 75 yards respectively, and each guy scored a TD. Tight end Terrence Ferguson also had 62 yards on 4 big catches. Oregon needed every one of them in this game. And Oregon DN Mateo Uiagalelei had 5 tackles, including a sack and 2 TFLs. So a nice day for him. So we've been waxing poetic about this game for a while now, and we didn't even mention that Oregon wide receiver Trayshawn Holden got ejected for spitting on Ohio State DB Davison Igbinison. Just an absolutely nutty game all around. So, Seth, what'd you think of this one?
It was one of the best games of the year.
Oh, yeah.
Had to be. And future schedule, couple teams maybe down the line, but so far, this is the early vote for game of the year type material. So it was.
I mean, it really was. It was back and forth. Both teams were fantastic. Both teams were explosive. And in the second half, both defenses kind of adjusted and made it a little harder. And it was just exactly what you want out of a big game. So first question, where does this leave the Buckeyes and Ryan Day? Because suddenly that national title can still happen, but there's a lot less margin for error. I mean, they got to beat Penn State, right? Like you can't go 10-2, you make the playoff, but you don't want to be on the road in the first round of the playoff.
No, you don't want to go 10-2, being a lower seed where you have to go to one of the top 4, one of the other seeds home stadiums.
You don't want that at all.
College football playoff, the first weekend is at the home stadium of the higher seed. So you don't want to put yourself in that situation. And also look at the possibility of, Indiana jumping you.
Yep.
In the Big Ten.
That could happen.
That could happen where you could just miss the Big Ten championship completely.
Because even if Ohio State beats Indiana, if Indiana gets by Nebraska, who's going to beat them? Can Michigan score enough points? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either.
So, we're talking about if Nebraska doesn't beat Indiana, we're legit. Man, Kurt Cignetti, when he took that job, he said, I'm gonna make the Big Ten title game in year 1. I didn't think he was serious. I thought that was just a recruiting tactic.
Yeah.
Guy's unbelievable. But
when Luke Fickell came in year 1, they're preaching about championships. I was like, yeah, okay. Paul Chryst, last 2 years, with his recruiting, I was just like, well, okay, you might have to wait a year, Indiana fans, but his speed has really ramped it up big time.
Yeah, Cignetti, and he happens to have the guy I think is the best quarterback in the Big Ten in Curtis Rourke. I mean, that guy's he's unbelievable. So anyway, back to this, the Buckeyes.
Yeah. Yep.
Who are your favorites for the Big Ten title game now? Do you still think, because I went into this game thinking that Ohio State and Oregon were probably going to rematch in the Big Ten title game, no matter who won the game. And I still kind of feel that way, but where are you at with it?
Yeah, I'm still in the same boat too. I mean, it's Oregon, it's Ohio State. Yeah. They'll probably still make it, but Indiana nipping at the heels right now.
Yep. Ohio State's I feel like Ohio State needs to send a message against Indiana. I feel like when they play, they're going to have to not just win, but they're going to have to make it look
win
good.
Big. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
it doesn't have to be big, but I'm just saying 2-3 scores, relatively comfortable. I feel like if Ohio State wants to get where they want to in the seeding for the overall, they gotta do that. Do you still expect Ohio State to beat Penn State in a few weeks then?
I do. I
I do too. And I like Penn State a lot, but I do think Ohio State is gonna, this might be like when they lost to Virginia Tech in 2014.
Yes.
And it just kind of like made them figure out what they needed to fix. And then they come back really strong. So I don't think the Buckeyes are done yet. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it's mainly, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
It's more mainly defensively that they need to fix. Ohio State, that is, than offense. Offense, they were fine. I mean, maybe break an extra, a long run here and there, but second level, when going back, I was just kind of watching it again yesterday. Some of those offensive linemen going up to the second level really missed their blocks big time. So that's where you would want to see a little bit more improvement offensively.
For
but
sure.
Other than that, I mean, defensively, you gotta do a little bit more improvement, especially in the secondary. I mean,
Denzel Burke, man, by himself. Denzel Burke had a bad game. He's got to have a better game if they play again.
Yeah.
Period.
Yep.
And against Penn State, he's got to have a better game.
Yeah. And it's glaring too, because Trayshawn Holden, was even in, what was it, third quarter that he was ejected? Second?
No, it was early. I think it was the first quarter, wasn't it?
Was it the first quarter? I don't even remember.
It was early.
It was.
I can't remember exactly, but it was early.
Because he had like one catch.
Yeah.
Early in the first drive, and then he disappeared for 2 drives, and then I think he was ejected. So maybe it was the first quarter yet. So
awesome.
But anyway, like Oregon, that if they had Trayshawn Holden, who else would have known that it would have been even bigger? But,
yeah, I mean, I think Oregon should be ranked number 1 over Texas.
Yes,
I think they deserve that after beating the Buckeyes. I do.
Yep, I do too. Texas didn't look particularly well against Oklahoma. But
I mean, to be fair, Quinn Ewers is coming off injury.
Yeah.
But I just think if you look at the win over Ohio State is by far the best win either of those teams has.
Yeah. Because
and that means something to me.
Yeah, and Oklahoma is not the same Oklahoma.
No.
So
Oklahoma's good, but they're not the Buckeyes.
No. No. So you
gotta
put that win, which is basically a 1v2 in my book.
Yep. I agree with you. For sure. All right, moving on. Next game. We had our first overtime game. The number 4 Penn State Nittany Lions 33. The USC Trojans 30. This game was absolutely bonkers from start to finish. USC kind of dominated the first half, going up 7-3 after 1 quarter and 20-6 at halftime. The USC red zone defense was elite at keeping Penn State out of the end zone, but Penn State came roaring back, outscoring USC 24-10 in the second half to tie the game and force overtime. Penn State's last TD came on a 14-yard Nicholas Singleton catch to tie the game with just 2:53 left. Afterward, Penn State coach James Franklin said, I think the word resilient was probably the best word to define our team today, close quote. The Trojans have now lost 3 of their past 4 games and are a far cry from the top 10 team who defeated LSU on opening weekend. USC managed -3 yards on its first 3 plays of overtime before kicker Michael Lance missed a 45-yard field goal. Penn State advanced the ball to the 19 and kicker Ryan Barker nailed it to win the game. Penn State QB Drew Aller had a productive but mistake-prone day. He completed 30 of 43 passes for 70% for a gaudy 391 yards on 9.1 yards per attempt with 2 TDs, but he did have 3 picks for a QBR of 82.7. So he made some big mistakes, but kept playing, got the job done when it mattered most. So kudos to him for overcoming adversity on Saturday. The Penn State running game didn't go anywhere all day, as Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton were held to 56 and 26 yards respectively for an average of roughly 3 yards per rush between the two of them. Woof. But Penn State tight end Tyler Warren was absolutely unstoppable. The man had 17 catches for 224 yards a ridiculous 13.2 yards per catch with one of the greatest touchdown catches you'll ever see. Penn State went with this unbalanced formation, and Tyler Warren actually snapped the ball to Drew Aller, ran downfield in the end zone, leaped over the Trojan defender, caught the ball through the defender while falling to the ground. It was the best catch I saw all day Saturday, and it was a key touchdown for Penn State. Harrison Wallace had 3 for 53. Fleming had 2 catches and one on fourth down that helped a lot. Abdul Carter on defense had 5 tackles, a sack, 1.5 TFLs, and a pass defended. He made life difficult on Miller Moss in the second half. Seth, what do you think about this game?
It kind of felt like Lincoln Riley used this game as a, hey, I need to push my chips into this game.
Yeah.
He dug deep into his playbook in that first half. And it really confused Penn State's defense big time. And then once those deep of the playbook, plays ran dry, that offense kind of tapered off.
Yeah.
But I would be concerned if I was USC.
Oh, yeah.
Big time with this game.
Huge concern after that.
Huge
concern. To lose that game because they played well enough. They really played well enough that they should have been able to win.
Oh, for sure.
They had the advantage. They were way up at half. They were at home. They had everything going their way. Yeah.
But Tyler Warren, holy smokes, 17 catches. And that catch that you had said.
He's the best Penn State tight end since Pat Freiermuth.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you can't stop him. And he's stronger than Freiermuth.
Yes.
He's maybe not quite as fast because Freiermuth was crazy fast.
Yeah.
But he's stronger and he just bullies through people. It's crazy. And the fact that, I don't know, it's wild that Penn State has such a deficiency at wide receiver, but it almost doesn't matter because Tyler Warren's such a freak.
It's crazy. I mean, they brought in a couple transfers too from the portal.
Yeah.
At wide receiver, and they still have these deficiencies.
And it's still like I'm watching Iowa. They're running the ball and throwing to their tight end.
Yeah.
And that's like what they do. Yeah. It's like, okay, that's the thing. So USC 3-3, reeling after 2 consecutive losses to Minnesota and Penn State. Now they get Maryland, Rutgers. They get at Maryland, Rutgers, at Washington, Nebraska, at UCLA, Notre Dame. So, like, where are their heads at? Because, yes, they should absolutely win those next 2 games and be favored going into Washington. But, like, is USC still engaged at this point? Do they still care? Are they going to still go to bat for Lincoln Riley and run through a wall to try to win games? I think that's a legitimate question for a team that had college football playoff hopes that now is sitting at 3-3 and needs to find something else to play for.
Yeah. I mean, they gave up on them last year.
Yeah.
At 7-6. I mean, you had Caleb Williams, you went 7-6.
You went 7-6 with the Heisman Trophy winner.
And there was giving up last year. So there's a real question that it happens again this year. Yeah. And, you've already seen like guys like Bear Alexander go into the portal already.
Yeah.
So I really question USC. And I even question Lincoln Riley. Is his seat now hot?
I mean, they're not going to fire him because his buyout is crazy. But, his seat is getting progressively warmer because he is not delivering what he was hired to deliver. He is not. Right. He is not achieving those results that are similar to the results he had at Oklahoma, which is why he was hired.
Right. Yep. Drew Allen, this. So going to Penn State side now is you kind of got the sense going, in the first half, like, oh, this is another one of those big games.
Yep.
That Franklin usually loses in these big key moments. and he actually didn't mess it up this time.
Yeah, James Franklin, we got to give him credit because we rip him when he loses all those big games. Got to get him credit. This was a big game.
Yep.
Franklin needed to win it. He won.
Yeah. Yep.
He got it done.
Got it
flat
done.
out, and he dominated the second half. Flat out dominated it.
Yeah. And the only thing that I would have questions about, heading, down the line for Penn State is what's going on with the running game, because USC, they, from all intents and purposes, even with the injury, they didn't run really well against a USC defense.
Yeah. And the Buckeyes are leading the nation in rushing defense. So you got to be thinking that's coming. If you're
I mean, between Katron Allen and Nick Singleton, I mean, you had 3.5 yards per carry, but between the two of them,
it was bad. Yeah.
Not even 100 yards. And those are really talented running backs.
Yes.
So I gotta, you gotta question that running game.
For sure. I agree with you. All right. Let's move on to the next one. This one was also bananas, also an overtime game. The number 23 Illinois Illini 50, the Purdue Boilermakers 49. Illinois kicker David Allen made a 38-yard field goal as time expired to tie at 43 after Purdue had previously rallied to take the lead for the first time. Luke Altmaier threw a 25-yard TD pass in overtime to Pat Bryant to give the Illini a 7-point lead. In his only carry of the day, Ahmad Branch scored on a 3-yard run to bring the Boilermakers within an extra point of sending it in a second overtime. But Purdue coach Ryan Walters decided he didn't want to play another overtime. He elected to go for 2. Unfortunately for the Boilermakers, Illinois' Dylan Rosiak sacked Purdue's Ryan Brown on the 2-point conversion attempt to get the win. In a stat that is shocking to read, Illinois had lost 7 of 8 to Purdue going into Saturday. So this was getting the Boilermaker monkey off their back a little bit. Purdue was down 27-3 at halftime before executing a furious comeback to put the game into OT. They scored on defense. They scored on a 62-yard double reverse flea flicker. They recovered an onside kick. The Boilermakers pulled so much stuff out of their bag in that second half, you'd think Jeff Brom was still coaching them.
Yeah.
Illinois QB Luke Altmaier, 20 for 34, 379 yards, 11.1 yards per attempt, 3 TDs, no picks for an electric 91.8 QBR. Altmaier with a great game. Illinois was able to run the ball a little bit as Josh McCray and Luke Altmaier combined for 138 yards rushing on over 5 yards per rush and 3 TDs. And wide receiver Pat Bryant did Pat Bryant things with 4 grabs for 104 yards and the aforementioned touchdown. Wide receiver Zachary Franklin also chipped in 4 for 60 and a TD, while running back Josh McCray had 3 for 46 and a TD. Altmaier completed passes to 8 different receivers in total. For Purdue, Ryan Brown played well in relief of Hudson Card, going 18 for 26 for 297 yards, 11.4 yards per attempt, 3 TDs, 0 picks for a QBR of 83.7. He also ran the ball, which is a different dimension Hudson Card doesn't bring, with 17 carries for 118 yards on 6.9 yards per carry. Devin Mockabee also went over 100 yards for Purdue with 102 yards on 9.3 yards per rush and a touchdown. And Purdue tight end Max Clare led the way with 6 grabs, 133 yards, while Jamal Edrin, Jerron Tibbs, and Devin Mockabee all recorded a touchdown catch. Seth, what'd you think about this one?
What on earth?
Right?
I mean, I was looking, so I, went to the Purdue-Wisconsin game
right
previous week, and Wisconsin blew them out.
Yep.
It was not even a contest. And I was just like, Purdue is not going to even put up a fight the rest of the year. I mean, it was bad. But then to see, Ryan Brown coming in, obviously, first start, nobody has any tape on him probably. So you don't know what to expect.
Nope.
But
Illinois certainly didn't.
Yeah. Yep. But the pendulum swings, though, in that game were absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
And even that fumble return for a touchdown by Purdue, that I
Yeah.
think that really kicked a lot of it off,
It's true.
because Illinois had dominated that first half for most of it. And then second half, you get that touchdown pass by Ryan Brown. And then you get that fumble recovery for a touchdown. And then all of a sudden, those house of cards come down quick.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
and credit for
Ill-
Illinois, though. They could have just
Absolutely.
laid down. They could
Yeah.
have laid down, and I being a Badger fan, I've seen the worst from Brett and his you know late game clock management issues.
Yep.
So it's one of those where Bert would have done something wrong, but kudos to Illinois, coming back, having that late game, that late field goal, and then having that momentum, swing back your way for overtime, and then getting that touchdown in the very first play of overtime. So
Yeah, they kept aggressive, and it paid off for
kudos.
them.
Yes.
Congrats to
Yep.
the Illini, no question about it. And Bielema, I think they're 5-1 now, so
Yep.
good for
5-1.
Bielema for getting the job done in a year when he needed to prove it for sure. All right, next up we had the Iowa Hawkeyes 40, the Washington Huskies 16. This game was a beating. Iowa was up
Yeah.
20-10 at half before blasting the doors open in the second half to hit 40 points. Per usual, running back Caleb Johnson was the star for Iowa with 166 yards on an insane 7.9 yards per rush and 2 TDs. He had a long of 53, so he was both dynamic and efficient in his touches. And it's good he was so effective because Iowa, once again, didn't even really bother to throw. Cade McNamara attempted just 14 passes, but completed 8 of them for 108 yards, 7.7 yards per attempt, 2 TDs, no picks. His QBR was a respectable 71.6. Cade wasn't asked to do a lot, and he executed his piece of the offense just fine. Shout out to Iowa linebacker Jay Higgins, who had 14 tackles, including 5 solo, and defensive lineman Aaron Graves, who had 2 sacks. For Washington, Will Rogers went 22 for 34 for 195 yards, just 5.7 yards per attempt, 1 TD and 1 pick for a QBR of just 559.4. Damon Williams came in relief of Will Rogers and also managed just 4.4 yards per attempt. So they were accurate, but it was just way too much dinking and dunking, and they just weren't getting first downs and getting the ball down the field the way they needed to. Star Washington running back Jonah Coleman at 80 yards on 9 carries. So he ran well, but it just wasn't anywhere near enough to make up for a lackluster passing game. So Seth, what'd you think about this one?
This was just a old school, old Big Ten West beatdown. That's basically it. I mean, it was just a normal blueprint of what Iowa has done for years.
Yep.
Win on special teams, win the turnover battle. A lot of those turnovers that Will Rogers had really killed their momentum. At the beginning of the game, Washington was going, toe to toe with Iowa, and then those fumbles, interceptions just killed them.
Yeah.
Caleb Johnson.
He's
is
the
very
best. He's the best Iowa running back since Sean Green.
Sean Green. Yep.
He can absolutely dominate any game. And he has. He's the best running back in the Big Ten. I don't think it's particularly close.
Yep.
I don't think it's close.
No.
So he is special, and because of him, Kirk Ferentz doesn't have to throw the ball, which he loves.
Right.
And Cade McNamara doesn't really throw it, doesn't really turn it over that much. So when he's not asked to do a lot. So that works out well too. And I mean, this is the most dangerous Iowa team in years because Caleb Johnson has emerged as this unstoppable force. And all I can say is that I'm glad he's a junior by eligibility because he should almost certainly be in the NFL next year.
Definitely NFL. Yep.
Because a guy, you don't have a season like him. You don't stay in college after having a season like that.
No, nope, absolutely not. And he is really getting overshadowed right now by the running back at Boise State
Ashton
right now.
Jeanty, yes.
Jeanty,
But dude, Caleb Johnson is every bit as good.
Every bit as good.
I'd argue he's better because he's dominating a tougher conference.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, because there's legit, really, really, really good defenses in the Big Ten. Mountain West,
not exactly.
Hawaii?
Yeah. Not great.
It's not great at all. Not great at all. But yeah, Iowa right now is playing like Wisconsin, how Wisconsin offense ran in 2014 when they had Melvin Gordon.
Mm-hmm.
We barely passed the ball. I mean, Stavi
because why bother?
Right. Stavi had like 9 passes attempted all game long.
Right.
Some games. So just keep giving it to your best player and win.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
Iowa defense is Iowa's defense.
Yeah,
and
they're going to get it done.
They'll get it done. Washington, on the other hand, they are better than what we thought they were, though.
Oh, they're way better than I thought they were going to be. Way more competitive.
Yeah.
Yes. Like infinitely more. I didn't think they were going to be the kind of team that could beat Michigan.
No, absolutely not. So this was a good win for Iowa. This was a really good win for Iowa. This was one that you could hang your hat on and say, okay, we're back. Because their start of the season kind of was tanked a little bit with the Iowa State loss.
Yeah.
So now
that has set them back for sure.
Yeah. So now like the momentum, getting picked back up. So we'll see what they have the rest of the year.
They might, Iowa, it'll be really interesting because they sit here at 4-2.
Yep.
And if you look at the rest of their games, like, are they going to be at Michigan State? They'll be a heavy favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Versus Northwestern, they'll be a heavy favorite.
Yep.
Versus Wisconsin, they'll be a favorite at home.
They'll be a favorite at home. Yep.
At UCLA, they'll be a favorite. At Maryland, they'll be a favorite. Versus Nebraska, I don't know. That could be toss-uppy. But like Iowa, if Iowa gets to 10-2, are we talking about the college football playoff? That's possible.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. They could definitely get in at 10-2. Especially if Iowa State still wins.
Right. Iowa State keeps winning, so that makes that loss. And their other loss is Ohio State.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So like a lot of people are already putting Iowa State in the college football playoff in their projections too. So you got to go back and look to say, hey, it's only a 1-point loss to another potential college football playoff team.
That's
why
a really
not?
good point. Yeah.
But you're probably going to be favored in every game for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Nebraska, and the Nebraska game's at home. The Wisconsin game is at home.
It's a big deal.
Those are probably your 2 hardest games left on the schedule.
Yep.
As of right now, I put them a 6.5-point favorite over my Badgers. So
yeah,
I
think that's fair.
It's they could definitely get to the college football playoff. Will they make the Big Ten championship? No.
No,
only because only because they got Oregon, they got Ohio State, they got Indiana. Yeah.
Yeah, Ohio State has the tiebreaker. That's the problem.
Yeah.
They have.
Yep. And then you got Illinois right now too, in Penn State. So.
Right. Awesome. All right, let's move right along to another Big Ten West beatdown. The Wisconsin Badgers 42, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights 7. Wisconsin dominated this game from start to finish. It was 14-0 at half, 28-0 at the end of the third. So this was never competitive at all. Badger QB Braden Locke had a nice day, going 20 for 28 for 8.6 yards per attempt, 1 TD, 1 pick, and an impressive QBR of 91.7. But the star of the day was Badger running back Tawi Walker, 24 carries, 198 yards, 3 TDs. Yowza. Cade Yakimelli chipped in 72 yards on just 4 carries. So basically, Wisconsin eviscerated this previously vaunted Rutgers defense, both in the running and the passing games. Vinny Anthony had 81 yards receiving, and Will Pauling had 4 catches for 49 yards. In total, Locke completed passes to 10 receivers. And safety, Preston Bachman had 10 tackles, including 1.5 TFLs. Rutgers QB Athan Kaliakmanis had a miserable day, going 12 for 32. So that's just 38% completion percentage for just 103 yards on a paltry 3.2 yards per attempt. Yikes.
Yeah.
Kaliakmanis had 0 touchdowns and an interception for a QBR of 36.3. That is a brutal day at the office. Kyle Monangai was held well under 100 yards with 72 on 19 attempts for just 3.8 yards per rush and a TD. So it was a frustrating day for Monangai and this Rutgers offense. Seth, what are your thoughts on the Badgers' performance from Saturday?
Tawi Walker, man. I was telling you.
You're right. You were.
No offense to Ches Malusi.
Sure.
Thank you for your service. But he was maybe, I'd say 60, 70% of himself.
Yeah.
This whole entire season up to his last game. And it kind of was like, it was throwing a lot of things off. Tawi Walker at the beginning of the season wasn't getting the touches that he is now. He had 24 carries in this game.
Right.
He had maybe a third of that in some of these games where you were getting the ball to Ches and then also Cade Yakimelli as well.
Right.
Now, after, the discussions with the coaching staff, asking Ches, hey, we're going to give everybody else, the ball. He wasn't very happy with that. So, he just decided to kind of leave the team then and rehab and, continue his college career. He's probably going to enter in the transfer portal after this year. But when you give Tawi Walker his touches, and that's what the one thing that a couple of Oklahoma guys or the couple of Oklahoma writers had said that he needs his touches in order to get going. So yeah, fun day though.
Oh yeah.
That was, and
Absolutely.
then Braden Locke, besides the one interception, which is kind of like one of those, jump shooters in a basketball game where you hit 3 threes right in a row. Hey, I'm just gonna chuck one up, see what happens.
Sure.
This one was just this, redshirt sophomore, just throwing it up, and in the double coverage, and shouldn't have to begin with because he had 2 other receivers wide open.
Sure.
But it was one of those games where everything was clicking, and now
sometimes it all just works.
Yep. And now back-to-back weeks.
Yeah,
this
Badgers
offense
getting hot, scoring a lot of points suddenly.
Yep. So
that's kind of what you wanted to see, I think, when Luke Fickell took over was to score points. So
yeah,
in a more prolific way. So now you're seeing that a little bit with the Badgers.
Yeah. And if you guys ever look back and watch, this is what Phil Longo wants to run as an air raid.
Sure.
With because this is how he did it at North Carolina.
Right.
He had 2 1,000-yard rushers who are still in the NFL right now.
Yep.
Back in 2020. So this is
some quarterbacks that are in the NFL.
Yep. Some quarterbacks are also in the NFL too. So Braden Locke has always been a part about the system. Um, do I do I ever believe that he was in step with Tyler Van Dyke? No. Tyler Van Dyke has a whole better arm than Braden Locke,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
you know, the way he knows the offense is better suited than what he had with Tyler Van Dyke, and
Mm-hmm.
it's now showing after after now 2.5 starts.
Yeah. Yeah, he seems like he's growing into the role really well. So that's definitely
Yeah.
bodes well for the rest of the season.
Yep. And then Ethan Kellick McManus,
Oh man,
rough
he's
day.
garbage.
I mean,
He's
the
beyond
receivers.
terrible. Throws the ball way too hard. There's no touch. He's frequently behind his receivers, which
Yep.
leads to tons of incompletions and also interceptions. He is just a bad quarterback.
Yeah.
And I am not sorry. I can't believe Rutgers thought, Kirk Shiraka and Greg Schiano thought they could, Kirk Shiraka especially, thought they could
Yeah.
fix him.
Yep.
Thought it was PJ Fleck's fault. Well, it wasn't PJ Fleck. It was Nathan Kaliakmanis.
Nope.
He was the problem.
It was. I counted at least 8 or 9 drops easily from receivers in that game.
Yeah, but okay, but when you're throwing the
But
ball way too hard and
it's a
behind it, and
rocket.
you know what I
A
mean?
lot of those passes were rockets, though, with
Yes.
those drops.
Yes. So it's like
It
if you throw with
was,
a little touch, how many of those passes are caught?
yeah, yep, because it was just like some of those passes were only like 4 yards to
And he's just
to the sideline, and
yeah.
it was like he was like trying to throw it 40 yards down the field. I'm like,
It's
what are you
like he's a
doing?
pitcher trying to like show
Yeah,
off and throw as hard as he can for the radar gun.
yeah,
That's what he's
yep,
like when he plays quarterback. It's bizarre.
right,
I've
yeah,
never seen anyone who plays quarterback that way before in my whole life.
it's crazy.
Not
It's nuts.
outside of like a 7-on-7 flag football league, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like never anyone in real legit football played quarterback
Right.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's really bad, man. Rutgers, it's too bad, but the bigger story is almost this Rutgers defense falling apart this
Yeah.
way.
Yep.
Because this Rutgers defense, we've praised them so much and they've played so well at times, but
Yeah.
they're kind of coming apart at the seams lately.
Yeah.
And
I
I'm
mean,
worried. I'm worried about Rutgers going forward coming off this game.
yeah. I mean, they did lose a couple of their starters. I mean, a couple of
Yeah.
them were declared out before the game ever started.
Yep. That doesn't help.
It doesn't help, but would it really mattered much? No.
Right.
Because a single linebacker or a single corner is not going to prevent, even like 20 more yards from, or, like 20 yardage difference from Tawi Walker or anything like that. So it's kind of concerning if I was Rutgers, but, they're 5.4 yards per carry allowed going into this game. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something that is definitely got to be concerning for Rutgers.
People
For sure.
here, look, people are going to say this. People are going to say I'm overreacting, but I think Rutgers needs to be seriously worried about this upcoming game against UCLA. I know it's
Yeah.
at home, but UCLA, man, they have not quit on Deshaun Foster, and we'll talk about
No.
that. They haven't
Yeah.
quit.
No.
So, Rutgers better get right. They better get it right quick.
Yeah.
What I'm saying.
Yep.
All right. That brings us to our final game of the night. We had the Minnesota Golden Gophers 21, the UCLA Bruins 17. This game was a tale of two halves. In the first half, Minnesota had a performance riddled with drops and poor execution on both sides of the ball. UCLA was aggressive. They had changed up their defensive scheme. They were attacking, and they led 10-0 at half and had all the momentum. But the Gophers stole it back, scoring a couple consecutive TDs to start the third quarter, the second of which came off a short field after a Coy Parrish interception. Minnesota held the lead until UCLA scored with about 6 minutes left in the game. Then Minnesota somehow managed to punt with 2:44 left and then get the ball back with more than 2 minutes left. So they executed a defensive 3-and-out that they absolutely needed, got the ball back, calmly drove down, scored the winning touchdown on Darius Taylor's TD catch with under a minute left. Game ended with a UCLA, Hail Mary attempt and another Koi Parrish interception for Minnesota. Minnesota QB Max Brosmer had a great day, completing 26 of 37 passes for 193 yards, just 5.2 yards per attempt, but 2 TDs. His receivers also had several drops, so his numbers should have been considerably higher. Darius Taylor was largely shut down as UCLA changed up their defensive scheme to utilize more gap pressures and sold out completely to stop Taylor. In the first half, that strategy was successful as the Gophers shot themselves in the foot with several drops. However, in the second half, Minnesota got going behind star wide receiver Daniel Jackson, who had 10 catches for 89 yards. Jackson was the one reliable aspect of the Minnesota offense all night. Tight end Jamison Gears, wide receiver Elijah Spencer, and running back Darius Taylor also contributed in the passing game, including Taylor's game-winning touchdown catch. Minnesota defensive lineman Anthony Smith had 4 tackles, including a sack and 2.5 tackles for loss. So that was impressive for him. But Minnesota defensive tackle Devin Eastern was a menace, constantly pressuring Garbers, and he had a tipped pass which turned into an interception by Cody Lindenberg. But Devin Eastern was in the backfield all night, making life difficult for UCLA to even run their offense. Safety Koi Parrish had the 2 interceptions that I mentioned before. And for UCLA, QB Ethan Garbers had an up and down day. He was 25 for 36, so for 293 yards, which was good, 8.1 yards per attempt, 1 TD, but 3 costly picks. UCLA was totally stymied by Minnesota in the running game, managing just 36 yards rushing on 26 attempts for 1.4 yards per rush. Brutal. Wide receiver J. Michael Sturdivant had 107 yards receiving for UCLA, so he was the bright spot there, and running back TJ Harden had 57 yards receiving to lead UCLA. Seth, what are your thoughts on this game, despite the fact that I know you're not happy about the result?
I was very surprised at how hard you guys came back and won that one. I mean, you guys, that first half for you guys was...
It was a disaster.
PJ
Fleck said at halftime that it was the worst half of football he'd ever coached. Ever.
Ooh.
So that was bad.
Yeah. So, I mean...
It started on the first, dude. The first drive, we had a tight end drop a catch that could have gone for like 30 or 40 yards. And then where he was behind the defense and in his hands. And then we had another drop on the sideline. And I was like, oh boy, we're not quite ready. We are not sharp. Not good.
This is not our day.
And the first half was not good.
Oh. Yeah. You guys did really well run defense wise. And Jalen Berger is actually a really good running back too. I mean, this is his 3rd team now.
He can play though.
Yeah, he can play. J. Michael Sturdivant.
He's good.
He's good. Wisconsin wanted him too as a receiver. But anyway, Daniel Jackson just continues. I mean, I know
he's good, man.
Badger
I'm
fans,
gonna miss him next year.
I know, but his catches are amazing. Like, you know,
he has incredible hands. He really does, and his body control and just all of it are just. He's really elite. He's turned himself. He's a guy like he has good physical tools, but he doesn't have the greatest physical tools on the field, right? But what he has is just the body control and the hand-eye coordination and the route running and the precision, and it's just it all works for him. And he's a fantastic player, and that showed out in that second half. You know, I'll say I always thought this was going to be a hard game because of USC. Yes. Minnesota put so much into that USC win. They put everything into it. It was this emotional win. They won on 4th down at the end of the game, and or got ahead on 4th down at the end of the game. Went all the way down to the last play. Yep. I mean, it took an enormous. I think that was an emotionally and physically draining night game. Yeah. And then to bounce back, go across 2 time zones on the road to a team that has been competitive and is desperate for a win. So I thought it was going to be a tough game, and it was. And I was just really happy to see the Gophers show the fortitude for the second week in a row. And now I can officially say that the Minnesota Golden Gophers own Los Angeles. They own the whole city. It belongs to us.
Yes. Yep. You guys own all Los Angeles now.
That's how it works. We own it until we play again. That's sorry, I don't make the rules.
Yeah. Yep. There's no rules necessary for that. You can call it. Like a lot of times when the Badgers play Northwestern and Illinois, we own the state if we win both games.
Yep, absolutely.
Thing, same thing with you guys. But yeah, no, this is one of those games that, you had to look and see, are we going to have a letdown?
Yep.
Are we just going to sleepwalk through the first part of this game?
And they did.
But credit where credit is due, though, you guys fought back, and that's what good teams do. Good teams fight back. Good teams can find a way to win, and that is what good teams do: is find ways to win no matter what.
Yeah, that's a really good point you make, Seth. I think good teams find ways to win even when they don't play well.
Right. Yep.
And that's something you have to do. And the Gophers, after a shaky start to the season, have really rallied and become a good team, as we're heading down the stretch run and are in position to, it's not the lost season we feared after, the Iowa loss, where you're wondering, where's this thing headed? So it's good. Kudos to the Gophers. I'm really excited for the stretch run, and they have some games coming up, a few games they should be favored in. So that's exciting. And I think this game, the game for the Axe could be a bigger game. I know a couple of weeks ago we were saying, is this going to be for bowl eligibility? Well, I think it's going to be for a lot more than that. I think it's going to be for bowl placement. It's going to be for bowl placement.
Definitely. This could be like one of those where you get 8-9 win. Whoever gets the 9 wins. And it'll be quite interesting to see. Especially with Wisconsin's schedule the rest of the way. You got Penn State on the lights at Camp Randall. Then you got to go to home. Yep, and then you got to go to Iowa, and then you got to come back to Oregon. That's a very, very tough schedule. And then Nebraska, and then the
Minnesota.
So it's going to be a tough stretch, for the Wisconsin Badgers. But
I think Wisconsin has the identity now where they can compete in those games.
Yeah,
I think more than I thought that 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Right, you're starting to see that little identity come now. Especially on the offensive side of the ball. Defense is still trying to find its way yet, personnel-wise. There's some still pieces that I'd like to see play a little bit more than others, but other than that, I like where Wisconsin's heading. But going back to the Gopher game, you guys, that's one of those games where you look back at the end of the season and say, this was our season-defining moment right here.
Yep.
Between that and USC, but you pulled it out. You had to win.
Had to.
Because
you don't want to be 3-4 going into the stretch run. You don't want to be 4-3 is so much better than 3-4. It's not even funny. It's exponentially better.
And it's not just like 3-4 and 4-3, but it's losing the UCLA.
Yes, exactly.
Who, I don't know, maybe Purdue is in the probably worse, but
Purdue's worse. And I will say though, man, UCLA, they have not quit on Deshaun Foster. They are playing hard. And I think they're gonna get somebody. I don't know who, but I think they're gonna get somebody.
They'll jump up and get somebody. I don't know what the rest of their schedule is off the top of my head.
But
Rutgers, Nebraska, Iowa, Washington, USC, and Fresno State.
Yeah.
USC.
USC. Oh man, what if UCLA beat USC? You want to put Lincoln Riley on the hot seat. What if UCLA jumps up and gets USC? That would be, I don't even know. That would be wild.
Imagine those USC fans going back, watching the Deshaun Foster preseason press conference video, and they're like, we lost to this
that guy. Yeah, that could be enough to put Lincoln Riley on the hot seat as
Oh, for sure.
by itself.
For sure. Yeah.
And then if you look at the Gophers down the stretch, Maryland at home for homecoming, they should be favored. At Illinois is probably close. It's probably Illinois' favored, but not by a lot. And then that'll be a close spread. And then they should be favored at Rutgers too. So, and then they got the last two games, host Penn State and then go to Wisconsin. Those will be two tough ones to end the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of exciting stuff. A lot of exciting, all these Big Ten teams have exciting stuff in front of them. And I think Purdue proved that anybody can beat anybody in this conference. I know Purdue didn't win. I know they didn't.
Right.
But they were this close. They were this close to beating a good team in Illinois. Yes. And Illinois is a good team.
Yes, Illinois is a very good team.
So the fact that even the worst team in the Big Ten can come within a hair of beating the best, one play of beating the best team in the Big Ten, or one of the better teams in the Big Ten, one of the better teams in the Big Ten, shows you that everyone in this team's competitive, and that's why this league is so much fun to watch.
It's the best league.
Yeah, I think it is the best league.
It's not even close.
We have 2, 3, and 4 in the AP poll.
Yep.
We got Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State. I do actually, if you want to have that conversation, I'm with you. I think the Big Ten is better than the SEC this year. I'll say it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
I think the national champion is going to be from the Big Ten, and I think the Big Ten will have a better record in bowl season than the SEC. I'm saying that right now on record.
Yeah, because SEC chips have fallen on Ole Miss and Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And it's who else? Who else is now going to take the reins? Because it's not looking good for the SEC, that's for sure. At least for the top teams, anyways.
No, I'm absolutely with you on that. All right, we made it through all the games. Seth, thank you so much again for stepping in and being guest host. Absolutely. And if you want to check out Seth, remind me what your exact Twitter handle is.
At Scooby227.
At Scooby227. So give Seth a follow. He's great for all things Badger football and all things Big Ten football. He's a really good follow for all that stuff. And if you want to check us out, we Live for Saturday. We are obviously here on YouTube, but you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Podcast Addict, as well as Spotify. So please check us out there and leave review. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. Even if you're on audio only platform, please like and subscribe on YouTube. That helps us a lot. And thank you so much for listening. And we will see you in a couple days for the preview episode for week 8.